Well, welcome to the Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You podcast. I'm your host, Sean Langwell. I'm here with Tommie Whitener, who's an author of 8 books, and we're going to get into a fun conversation to give some inspiration to folks about how to write a book and what that impetus is if you've got a book in you. And every single person listening to this podcast, I know has a book in them. So, the nature of this show, if you like honest, vulnerable, and real stories about what it takes to not only become great, but self-confident and bold enough to be yourself, then this show is for you. Each of my guests started out as ordinary people like you and me, but have accomplished extraordinary things in their lives to be considered great masters or experts at what they have been called to do. Join me each episode for inspiring, encouraging, and meaningful conversations with diverse people from all walks of life and industry. Leaders and brave individuals who offer unique insights into the fields of arts, entertainment, business, finance, technology, healthcare, sports, psychology, recovery, self-improvement, personal growth, and so much more. Whether you are in the same field as my guests or not, I guarantee you will walk away from each episode feeling better about yourself and inspired to take the next bold step toward your own goals and aspirations. Your life will improve if you dare to be great and dare to be you. Welcome, Tommie.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So glad to have you here. This is a unique opportunity. We're doing it live in the studio of the Langwell household. And I'm going to read a little bit about Tommie, but I'm also going to ask you to just share some other tidbits because your story is a long one. I know that you were a trial lawyer or
I was.
yeah, a trial lawyer. Went to UCLA down Southern California. He is a Dodger fan. I will not hold that against him. Dodger fans and Giant fans still can get along.
2 games in front of their division. They're okay
And
now.
there you are, and scrapping and clawing and hoping to spoil in a couple weeks. But instead of creative writing, novels and short stories, Tommie really wanted to take off and do something different. So the firsthand and insightful interview. Oh, wait, we're missing this here. So instead of writing about criminal law and doing the Lincoln lawyer and divorce and all of that, I'm going to not read all this. Tell me what you did with your first novel and how that inspiration came a little over 8 years ago.
Well, I had completed a personal development program in Northern California. It was a series of retreats. There were, I think, about 25 people there. And it was going into people's past and desires, their emotional, psychological makeup, some deep insights by the leaders of the program. And prior to that, I wasn't really a personal development guy, as you might expect of a trial lawyer and someone who once dreamed of going into the Foreign Service. I was a facts guy. I wanted to know exactly what the situation was, what I could do to change it or improve it or ameliorate the bad consequences of it. And so when I took that course at the suggestion of my wife, yeah, it was a fish in some strange waters, but it worked out pretty well. I learned things about myself that I'd never known before. And I was so impressed that I thought, I think I can write a book. And so I began.
And there's some quotes on your website about some of the reviews from this book, but tell us a little bit about what that experience was like from a personal development, because you came from a fact-based lawyer background, and here you are dive into the deep waters of personal development. What was this experience like? And then we'll talk a little bit about your first book, Mother Earth, Three Couples.
Okay, well, actually, it dovetailed really well because behind every fact are emotions of
Mm.
one sort or another. And I learned to recognize those emotions in myself and in others and to deal with them. So it became a natural to create a novel out of that at my first attempt. And I hadn't written a novel before. I was trained in the Air Force as a journalist. My last duty station was as the base newspaper editor on Anderson Air Force Base, Guam. And then I wound up going to law school and not pursuing journalism, which had always been a love of mine, especially the IJ, of course.
Which I work at, and it's just a great local paper. So I want to read a couple of these blurbs here from people who had some insight. And one is from Tina De, how do you pronounce this last name? Demias?
Tina DeMoose.
Tina DeMoose, international leadership and team coach. The reviews of Mother Earth, Three Couples, a detailed personal look at something surprising and painful life changes that are possible as individuals embark on personal growth journeys. Mother Earth, Three Couples gives insights into one aspect of the burgeoning personal development field through the eyes of Alex, Roberta, and Marie, whose lives are forever changed as a consequence of their adventures in the California redwoods. So what were some of these adventures and what was some of the pivot points in this book from a storytelling perspective that really made you want to write it? I mean, you're down here and some inspiration happened when you were at this retreat.
Well, I recall now for the first time in a few years that when we started the very first retreat, one of the leaders said, "Now listen, you're going to undergo some changes as a result of this program. Do not rush home and make any major changes to your life until you assimilate them, especially including divorce."
Hmm.
And I kind of laughed. I thought, oh, yeah, if you got a good marriage, that ain't going to happen. But it's true. People saw in themselves the time for a change in their life. This program was change oriented, and some of the people in my group did separate. So when I decided to follow three different couples that had three different results as because of attending the program, they all had different paths. So did they absorb all these changes and share them with their spouse and grow together and move on to have a more solid marriage? Or did it break them up?
Hmm.
Uh, who changed and who didn't, both in the spouse who attended and in their respective spouse?
And what came of this in terms of from your own personal experience, what changed inside of you that helped give you some clarity and conviction, if you will, for strengthening your marriage or looking a little bit deeper into yourself and even self-awareness? Because there's a lot of personal development books out there that talk about self-awareness. Some of them give lip service, but this is a firsthand account. So share with our listeners, if you will, what that experience was for you and any ahas that you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, well, the first one would be a sense of empathy that I learned there to better look at another person, their motivations, why they're reacting in a particular way, and how that would be impacting them, impacting me, and perhaps impacting our relationship. So to better sense the essence of another person. And this is not easy to do. I mean, you go to these retreats and you learn through doing. There were many exercises we did. This was not a lecture series. This was we did ropes courses, and there were a
Hmm.
lot of tears shed and self-disclosure and things like that. And you just learn to see people in a different way that you don't necessarily see in your everyday life.
Did the retreat help you lower some of the walls? Because some of the things that I write about from a personal development space is really about peeling the onion layers back and looking a little bit deeper, but not just from a self-awareness perspective, but really getting to the heart of the vulnerability. So did this retreat help you and how, if it did, how did it help you become a little bit more vulnerable and being willing to share some of those vulnerabilities with your spouse?
Oh, that's a tall order.
Yeah.
Uh, First of all, when you're in a room with, say, 25 other people, and one is pouring out their heart, perhaps as to an incident that occurred many years in the past, perhaps they're recalling for the first time in many years, maybe that they've suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people had to stop and take a walk outside.
Yeah.
But the tears were flowing, and myself included. There were a couple sessions when, boy, something came out totally unexpectedly. And so that was part of what made me want to write the book. I wanted to continue coming to grips with that.
And the subsequent books go through, I'm not going to read the whole list here, but of the other seven books that you've written, Tommie, which ones really stand out to you? And there's everyone's slightly different. I love California vignettes because it's easy to read. And for the listeners out there who haven't written a book or even a short story that want to get it submitted and published, we're both part of a group, part of the California Writers Club, Redwood Writers, that really was my first introduction into being able to become a published author by submitting to an anthology. And I got rejected the first time because I didn't have an editor. So, of all the books that you've written, which ones stand out and have significant meaning and impact to you, A, and B, what are some of the themes that you love to talk about? I mean, there's a certain tongue-in-cheek humor with all of your work that I just love.
Well, first of all, I would say that I had to overcome my training as a journalist and a lawyer. Writing creatively is an entirely different world. And so when you're writing as a journalist, it's what I mentioned before, just the facts, ma'am.
Hmm.
And the same with a lawyer. If you're writing for a judge, you better make it just succinct and in the format he's used to receiving. When you get into changing people's perceptions and emotions in a creative novel or short story, that's a whole new deal.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that every day. So overall, just let me say that every one of my books has been better. And I don't and I attribute that to the fact that I've tried to make them better. I've tried to continue learning, and I do that by reading the best novelists, the
Hmm.
best short story writers. And I pick up things all the time. I underline and often by the way, if it's a living author, I buy the book. I buy it and I buy it in a bookstore if I can, because I like for that living author to get the product of their labors, to get a
Hmm.
little profit. If it's a deceased author, I buy it as cheaply as I can.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you look to them for the inspiration that they had, and it carries over. There's no exact thing. You don't copy anyone, but you do look to other people who are very, very good at what they do.
And there's a couple things that you just mentioned. There's reading authors that are best-selling authors. You didn't say best-selling, but that are well-known and really good professional authors. And the other thing that for those who have not yet written a book is to, read. There's power of association. So read the books that mean something to you and are in the genre that you think you'd like to write in, A. And also, um, trust your gut a little bit and take some chances, right? I mean, how did you go from being fact-based to doing a narrative that has all kinds of twists and turns in it? I'm reading the Bar Pilot right now, and there's just all this. It's a relationship book, really. This guy can't figure out what the hell he wants because he's a freaking perfectionist and has this grand ideal of who it is that he wants in a mate, but underneath it, I haven't gotten there yet. You don't have to spoil it, but there's probably a little bit of imposter syndrome in this guy because of whatever backstory that I haven't gotten to yet. So the question, if there is a question in here, is how do you change hats from fact-based to creative and put that forth in something to be able to tap into people's emotions?
Yeah, I think you hit one of the keys there when you said take a risk. And so absolutely, in my my novel I just finished called The Showrunner. It's about a Hollywood television producer. And in the very beginning and in the very end, I take a flyer. I've never done anything like that, but it's in the style of James Michener.
And explain for some that don't know what take a flyer means.
Oh, take a risk, take a
Okay.
chance, write in something you're not accustomed to. So Michener, I remember vividly when I read Hawaii, and it starts when underneath the Hawaiian Islands, it was totally flat. I don't know how many millions or billions of years ago. And then there was a little bump on the ocean floor. And then there was the beginnings of a volcano. And he brings you all the way up to Captain Cook and when the Hawaiian Islands were settled by the Polynesians before him. So I did that in the beginning of the book. And I did that in the end of the book. Total flyer. I don't know how it's going to be received. I've only had a couple of people read it. I think it worked well. So anyway, we'll see.
Speaking of flyer, I'm just gonna call it out. There's a freaking fly flying right in front of our screen, but you know what? We just roll with it, folks. We roll with it. So let's change gears a little bit, and talk to some people out there that are sitting on 100 stories. I heard somebody say at one of our writers' conference, I think it was 2 years ago, the Sonoma County Writers Conference, which is coming up again in October of next year, that we all have more than we have so many books in our brains and our experience that it would take more than a lifetime to write them all. So part of what I teach and talk about is this decision criteria and making a decision. You already thought we talked about taking risks, but help people figure out what it is that they can take a chance and start that first short story or book and whatever you have from a wisdom and experiential standpoint to pass on to people.
Well, first of all, I think you've got to have the desire. And you have to recognize in yourself the ability to follow through in order to reach that desire. So you want to write a book? Everybody wants to write a book. But do you have the wherewithal to sit down in front of your computer every day for hours at a time, perhaps, and devote yourself to that book and to going back and editing and changing it? If you do, great, have that. Maybe you're the next somebody, Shakespeare. But if you recognize, if your life is filled with failed projects, maybe you don't want to undertake it. But if you think you're going to follow through, if you do want to have a book, the first thing is to write something. So when I begin every chapter, I begin with a blank screen. And I perhaps have an idea what that chapter is going to be about. Perhaps I don't, but I sit there looking at that screen and eventually I type a word. Maybe it's the,
Hmm.
and then there's another word after that. And pretty soon off I go. So that's the first of I think the Chinese had a saying, journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah,
And indeed it does.
Lao Tzu. And to that end, so you've got the blank screen, you write the first word, the. Now comes some of this other stuff. There's two different things here. There's some people plot out the entire story, they outline it. If it's a fiction piece, they may have character profiles and backstories so that they understand and they don't get lost. What's your writing style? Are you a pantser or a plotter?
Both.
Okay.
So in Tom and Leona, which is basically a fictional memoir of my grandparents in Arkansas, because she wound up in the mental institution for 40 years.
Oh my
The
gosh.
the plot switches back and forth between my grandfather, who raised four little boys on his farm, including my father, while she was in the mental institution, and he only had one arm. He was born with one arm. How he plowed, I have no idea. They were poor farmers, didn't have a tractor. So to follow those two arcs, those story plot arcs, I did plot it out. And I've done that again with the showrunner because that's really involved. I've got three arcs going here at least. So I've got Stewart, the showrunner, successful, then unsuccessful, and about to be drummed out of Hollywood if he doesn't produce. Then he brings a Russian woman here with her 15-year-old daughter to marry after they meet serendipitously.
Hmm.
So we've got Lena's arc. She's got her own problems of assimilation and relationship with Stuart. Then we've got her 15-year-old daughter, Dasha, and Dasha gets in with a bad crowd when she's ostracized because the Ukrainians in her high school know that she's Russian. So we follow all of these arcs, and I just needed to plot that so I could see who was doing what when, because I switched back and forth.
This is really, really, I love what you just described there too. And there's some of your writing, not all of it, but you pull in with the Ukrainian slash Russian influence. You bring some of that in there without being overtly or directly political. But let's talk about that a little bit. How do you navigate some of the tougher topics that people don't necessarily uh, they may talk about in private, but when you're publishing stuff, there's an art to how to do that without coming off as it's a risk. I mean, you speak to that if you can, how you handle it.
Yeah, it's just a judgment call in the last analysis. You just have to decide how revealing you're going to be. If you want to delve into social issues at all. If you just take television writers talk about beats. If you watch a television series or show, every episode, every scene is called a beat, and they do a chart, and they say this beat it consists of boy meets girl. Next beat, girl goes on vacation next beat, and they chart those all out. If all you do is chart your novel out in terms of beats, you've got a pretty slim tome.
Hmm.
So you have to fill it out with something. So make it interesting for the reader. Place. I like place. The bar pilot talks a lot about the things around San Francisco Bay. You know, I'm so familiar with, I love uh, San Francisco Bay area, Marin County. I've lived in San Francisco for 4 or 5 years, so I filled in there. Others take flyers on, geez, I'm reading a book right now, uh, and she takes a flyer on some Shago people in southern France 400 years ago, and it's interesting as hell. But that's a little flyer for her, totally off the plot path of her protagonist.
But there's something to be said too, depending on where the audience is, and we're going to get into audience in a second. But when you have something that's identifiable, a lot of, my wife's books, most of them take place either in the fictionalized version of Sonoma County or Northern California, or 100% fictionalized version of Petaluma in her most recent book. And it's free plug for you, Chrissy, Jilted Lovers Club, which has the landmarks that are, the Petaluma Hotel, Seared Restaurant, and the bank building that used to be the Sea Bank. But one of the things I loved about the bar pilot is I grew up in the Bay Area. I was born in Daly City, and you're talking about all these different landmarks. And one minute you're out on the San Francisco Bay with a dude trying to save a whale with a freaking hunting knife, and the next minute you're having, lunch at the Marin Yacht Club, or I can't remember what it was, but that's what's fun in it. It gives tangibility, even if you're not from the area. It creates this sense. It's almost like another character, right, Tommy?
It really
If
is.
you
It
have this
really is.
scene detail in place, that becomes something that helps support the story and put it into context. So um, it's just fun. But let's talk a little bit about the goals of your writing, because one of the things that's important to make writing interesting is to have a clear idea of what you want the reader to think, feel, be, something that usually pulls on the heartstrings. So, how do you incorporate that into your writing?
Okay, thanks for asking that question because I think it's the heart of all good writing. So I write what I call, or many would call, literary fiction. That means it's just not spewing out a bunch of facts. Upscale fiction sometimes it's called. And in order to write that, you can take these flyers if you can engage the reader, but you always have to look for the essence of things. And that means knowing what to leave out. So look around the room. If you wanted to describe this room, there would be maybe 1,000 items in here you could describe, from that coffee cup to that salt shaker. So you have to decide what you want to be
Mhm.
representative of the essence of this room. So maybe I focus on the mirror, and in the mirror is the elapsing time. And now you can go to that time, and it can be representative of whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Your age, the passage of time, of the future, the past. So you can, that's the essence of one thing that can be representative of the entire room. So always look for that essence.
And one thing that I learned in my creative writing class, going back to college after being out for 20 years, was that the economy and the efficiency of doing more than one thing. And that goes back to your skill at describing scenes or place or setting, and how we can use these things with intention to do more than one thing. So what you just described, I'm looking at it here. There's a mirror over there with a reflection of the clock, and that can be something that's not just a, a random, non-purposeful, concrete detail, that it has meaning and purpose behind it. So how, I'm going to put you on the spot here. how do you stitch some of these together? Do you plan some of these out as far as the scenes and settings and where you want to take the reader, or is it more stream of consciousness when you're in the middle of writing a
The,
chapter or the book as a whole?
the latter. I like to write. That's the best part of everything. Editing and reviewing, and that's secondary. But when I sit down and I get up 4 or 5 hours later and I've not got 1,000 words, I like it. Sometimes not justifiably so, but sometimes it needs always needs some polishing. And I change my writing every time I read it. So I'll think something is finished, and maybe a few weeks later I'll go back and review it. No, that didn't quite work. Need to change that. So.
So when you're writing, to give people, because writing a book and publishing a book and following through, walk people through your entire process so that, because sometimes what happens is a lot of us start shit and we don't finish.
Mhm.
To see it over the finish line. So, what is part of your process from a time perspective? And how can you offer some encouragement to people who may be inclined to want to give up because it's not good enough, it's not the best thing, and all that other mental, what I call mental horse shit, gets in the way of them completing the project? So, there's two things there. What's the process time-wise? And then what keeps you going forward?
So everybody's different, of course. I think 1,000 words a day is pretty doable. I do it regularly. Occasionally, I only do 500. Occasionally, I do 1,500. But if you look at that 1,000 words a day and an average novel, let's call it 80,000 words. Some are less, some are more. So if you wrote every single day, that'd be 80,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but I can't write every single day. My wife's far too demanding for that, and I like to play golf. So you figure out 80 days and where you're going to put those in your calendar, and it takes me about usually 8 or 9 months to write the first draft. And the first of many very talented people say, first draft is just let it spew, get it
Yeah.
out. And then you've got something to work with and you can go back and refine. And by the time you've gotten to the end, you probably changed somewhat what you set out to do. So there's going to be revisions required all the way through.
And some of that too, being a rookie writer 10 years ago, is there's this inclination to want to get that chapter, that sentence perfect. And like what you just said, I think is one of the best pieces of advice for especially novice writers is to just get the story out. No
Mhm.
matter, Anne Lamott says, write your shitty first draft. Get it out of your head, out of your soul, out of your heart, out of your mind and body, onto the screen or in a notebook like this, but get it out and don't worry about the editing and crafting these perfect sentences because that's what editing's for. And let's talk a little bit about self-editing and then the rest of the publishing process so we can at least close that loop for people that need to know what some of those steps are.
Okay, well, first of all, I write with Word. I've experimented with other programs, but Word works for me and it has a read back function. So I will have it, sometimes I'll write a
Hmm.
sentence and I'll have it read back to me and then go on to the next. Sometimes I'll listen to one of my paragraphs. Sometimes or always I'll listen to the entire chapter. And then in order to get to the flow, maybe I'll have the previous chapter and then I can move on with that. So let's see, let's say I've done my second draft now. It's in pretty good shape. What are you going to do with it? If you can, get a beta reader. A beta reader is someone that will read it for you and not come in with line items or question where you put a comma, but somebody who would say, you know, this is a pretty damn good book, and here's what I like about it, and here's what I don't like about it. And will tell you that perhaps one of your protagonists doesn't have enough of a backstory. Where did he grow up? If we're going to like this guy, we better know a little bit about him. So
Mm-hmm.
you can do something like that with a good beta reader. And it really, if you can find somebody who knows a little bit about creative writing, be very helpful. So your mother's going to love your book, but she's not going to be very good probably.
And she might not be your core target audience as well.
Exactly so. Exactly so. And there's another thing, you know, you have to decide how revealing you want to be in your book, knowing your mother's going to read it. So if you want to say fuck a lot And you don't want your mother to know you use that word.
Right.
Doubtful in this day and age, but nevertheless, you have to decide what you want to do with that.
I'm laughing because the last we already um, put it out there in the world, but Christy's like, "Can we swear on this podcast?" I'm like, "You can do whatever the fuck you want." She's all good. I'm going to talk about the fuck it chapter. So you've done some self-editing. You've got a beta reader, somebody to provide some feedback. That feedback, from what I understand, is often, like you said, not the detailed line item, comma here, period there, but the overall flow of the story. And also the part that you didn't mention is how do they feel from it, right? Do you want some of that from a beta reader?
Yeah,
Was there an evocative, something that moved them?
yeah. If they could tell you I liked it or don't like it, and here's why I like it, if they do, and of course it's going to be hopefully more detailed than that with specifics, what they specifically liked, what they didn't like,
Hmm.
or I had a protagonist that I thought was very likable, and a couple of beta readers told me I hated that asshole,
Yeah.
so I did some changes.
And the other side of this is those are just depending on your beta readers, they look for the consensus, right? One may not like it because of whatever reason, personality or personal biases, whereas the other one may love it.
How true. You can't make everybody happy. In the last analysis, you have to make yourself happy.
Yep. So you've got that done. You've got your second draft. You're ready to send it to an editor. So walk through the next three steps between that and getting it published.
Okay, so if you can have somebody read it for typos and misplaced commas, all well and good. A lot of that's available on Pro Writing Aid or on the computer. Then you need somebody to get it ready for publication, and that's where you have to make a decision. Are you going to self-publish? If so, you can find somebody to format it for you, put in all the right spacing and all that stuff. And it's highly specialized. I don't do it. I have a man who does it for me, does it very quickly and cheaply. And he's the one who basically gets it ready for publication so you can put it on Ingram Spark or Amazon or Amazon called KDP as you want. However, if you may want to find a commercial publisher, one of the big ones. They're mostly in New York. And most of them, I think all of them, will not take your manuscript directly from you. They want you to have an agent. The rationale being, if your book is not good enough to have an agent take you on as a client,
Mhm.
then they don't want to see it. So then you have to send out query letters to agents, and there are lists available all over the place.
Yep.
And each of these literary agents wants to receive your manuscript in a different way. Some want first 5 pages. Some want 10 pages. Some want 25 pages. Some want it embodied in your email to them. Some want it as an attachment to their website only. And so you have to go to each literary agent, find out how they want to receive it, and you send it in. And then you get an answer, maybe in 2 months. So some will tell you if you don't receive an answer in 2 months, it's a denial.
And part of that, and just to interject briefly, part of that literary agent process is also knowing what genre you want to write in. And that's part of the what I talk about in my teaching too, is understanding the niche, the genre, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, all that sort of thing. Because there are literary agents who specialize in various types of books, right?
Without doubt,
Okay.
without doubt. And some they'll tell you like no cookbooks or children's books or only children's books. So you most of the literary agents are with a firm. And then, so you go to the firm, it'll have a nice picture of them, and you click on their picture and it'll say wants this.
Okay. So that's the traditional and self-publishing side. You've got it formatted. Do you hire an editor before or after it gets to formatting?
I've had volunteers before.
Okay. And then comes this little thing, and we're just going to paint this picture from a 30,000 foot degree or 30,000 foot view. You've done it a bunch of times. I've done it a bunch of times, but let's give the readers a taste of what this next stuff is. Because for new authors, sometimes this is where it's like, I can't do it. I need help. Ask for help. Pay for somebody that knows how to do the stuff that you don't know how to do because it's going to save you a whole lot of headache and it doesn't cost a whole lot. So we're talking specifically about a manuscript that is ready to be published on Ingram Spark or KDP. So just give us the high level of what that entails, and then I'll interject a couple points in here just for the listening audience on a marketing fund.
Okay, then if you secured an agent and the agent is trying to find a publisher for you, then that's going to be an interaction between you and your agent and the publisher, and they're all different. Some of the publishers are quite good about helping you out, finding personal appearance sites for you. Others don't do a damn thing. So let's take self-publishing. So once you get it published, you buy a bunch of copies. So you've got copies for promotion and giveaways and things like that, and then it's available on Amazon or KDP. And then I send out to all my different social platforms. I've got a nice graphic I send out, and that you can easily do yourself. They're all different, but that's then. Let me say a word about ChatGPT. I never ever use GPT for my writing. First of all, it's not good. So
Yeah.
maybe someday it will, but it can't write worth beans. So, but it is useful to uh, formulate a marketing plan, for example. So say, chat, I've got this new book. What do you suggest I do? Give me the steps. And it'll probably give you 4 or 5 pages of things to do, one after the other.
And that's a good thing because I use it from a marketing just as a little tick list too of like, okay, I got this book. What are the 5 different PR outlets that I should look at for a book in this genre? What are the 5 next things that I should roll out in terms of self-promotion? We're skipping the step here that is really, it can be daunting, is the actual loading of the manuscript into KDP or Ingram Spark. If you're working with a traditional publisher, the agent and the publisher will take care of that for you. They'll edit it multiple times.
Correct.
They'll do all the research. We had somebody come up to the Redwood Writers recently from New World Library down in Novato, who talked about all the work that gets done before the book even gets published. I mean, you're talking about colors, you're talking about typeface, you're talking about cover, you're talking about all the other nuances. Because, folks, the one thing that I am going to interject here from a marketing standpoint, the cover does matter. People do judge each other by the cover and the book by the cover. So you want that first impression to really sing true. And it just it goes without saying it's going to make it easier for you when you are promoting it on social media, when you're doing book talks. You want to have something that is true to the story, but is right for the audience that you're trying to reach, right, Tommie?
Boy, do I wish I had brought a copy of the cover for the showrunner with me, because I would be holding it up now and say, here's a dynamite example. But what Sean's just said is absolutely true.
If you have it, I'll throw it on here before we load this episode in a couple weeks so you can have that. And let's transition into that. So we've kind of covered A to Z, getting started, what it entails, talked about your first book. Let's talk about what you have coming out and when showrunner's coming out so we can do some shameless self-promotion for that.
Oh, let's do that. So just one more thought about uploading to KDP. It's basically idiot proof. They lead you through it. So once you've got a formatted manuscript and once you have your cover, and it needs to be formatted because you won't know the number of pages,
Mhm.
and without knowing the number of pages, you won't know the spine width. So then your artist will need to know the spine width before he can upload to KDP. But they, as I say, they take you through it step by step. What was the other question?
So we've covered pretty much A to Z from getting started your first book to now you've got another book that is in production right now, The Showrunner. Let's give the readers a taste of what to expect with that and when they can expect to be able to get it.
Well, right now I'm in the solicitation process looking for an agent. So if there should be a miracle and an agent should respond favorably soon and we come to terms as to a contract and his or her royalty, that could happen in, the next couple of weeks. If I am unable to find anybody and I self-published, I kind of have a self-imposed deadline of 2 months.
Okay.
So that would be November 1st.
Perfect. And what can you say without spoilers as far as what to expect? You already touched on it earlier, and it did a great job of the three different characters and their roles and their narrative arcs. But overall, what is the showrunner about?
So it's about Stewart is a showrunner, as I said, that's a television series producer. And when you look at the credits on the screen, you'll never see the word showrunner. But in the industry, everybody knows what a showrunner is. He's the top creative boss of all these shows. Tina Fey, probably one of the best known, 30 Rock. She made millions of dollars as showrunners do. So my protagonist, Stewart, had a show and it was wildly successful. He was a rookie. He got lucky. He had a great script he'd written himself. He bought a wonderful home in Santa Monica. It was his dream home. And then he wrote his next show. This time he had a writer's room. So he brought in 4 writers that he could afford to pay and wrote a script, and it flopped. He wrote another one. It didn't even get greenlit. Greenlit means when the studio says, all right, start shooting, it's a show.
Got it.
Didn't even get greenlit. An abject failure. And so now he knows that unless he produces a winning show, he's through in Hollywood. In the meantime, Lena comes here because she's in love with Stewart. They have met in Helsinki after being on Zoom innumerable sessions, loved each other from the minute go, if that's the right way to say it.
From the get-go.
From the get-go, yeah. And then she comes here on a fiance visa. With a fiance visa, you can bring a person here, and if you marry them within 90 days, they get to stay, and if they don't, they have to go back. So
So he's got a double whammy going on. He's got to produce this show that's going to either get greenlit or he's out and, on Hollywood Boulevard with a hat in hand, and he's got to bite the bullet and marry this woman in 90 days.
Yeah. So the pressures are building. And let me talk about script arc. If you take the television shows or movies as an example, it's an arc. And I repeatedly describe it as such. It builds and builds and builds, and it's at a crisis moment. They call that page 100 out of a 120 page movie script. So at page 100, all is lost. It looks like the protagonist is going to be eaten by the monsters, succumb to drugs or what have you, and then there's a redemption. They pull it out, and by the end of the book, if you want to have a happy ending, it's happy. And if you don't, you have to resolve it as you want.
But that's for every good story. It's build, build, build. And sometimes the stories have this here, but the real climatic moment is up here. You finally did, boom. Pull the rug out from under your feet. Now what are you going to do? Now what are you going to do? How are you going to get out of this? And then you climb back out. And that's,
without doubt,
script writing and storytelling 101 for those who haven't done it. And, to that end, it's not always easy to think in those terms, but if we could tell the listening audience, Tommie, our lives are stories, right? And how do you translate that narrative arc that isn't just a ho-hum work-a-day type of world, but how do you translate that to push the envelope a little bit and be a little bit edgy in the story?
Well, you have to create conflict. No conflict, no story. Nobody wants to read a description of everything in your living room. No conflict there? Inject some, make it some. You're a creative writer. If you're not creative, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. But you have to create that arc by creating conflict and resolution.
So is that hard? And just on a whim here, being a trial attorney where you're dealing with facts and you're trying to resolve conflict, now putting on the creative hat, how did you navigate that to create conflict that you have control over for the nature and the value of telling a good story?
Well, part of it is a little plotting. because you can say, let's say, let's see, the showrunner is 33 chapters. It was going to be 36. Didn't turn out to warrant 36, so it's 33. And at chapter 30, that's where everything is in crisis mode. Stuart, Lena, Dana, Dasha. And so then I've got three more chapters to start toward resolution. And in 33, it wraps up.
There you go. So, Tommie, this has been a delight. I'm glad that we got to have this conversation. You and I are still novice writers, if you will, authors. We're out there doing what we can and doing what we love. But for those of you who are listening in who have not yet put pen to paper or open up the blank screen and type those first words, I encourage you to do it. The title of this show, this podcast, is Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. And I encourage every single person listening, dare to be you. Take a chance on yourself. This is not anything more than just taking that one bold step forward. There's another thing that I read recently that is just a reminder is, you know, hospice nurses actually say many, many times that the regrets people have on their last breath before they take their last breath is not of all the shit that they did that they wish they didn't. It's about all the things that they didn't do that they wish they did. So that is why I created Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. That is why I invited Tommie over here because he's an inspiration. He's a brother from another mother, and we just have fun writing great stories. So, folks, this has been Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. I'm your host, Sean Langwell. How do people get a hold of you to get the showrunner?
Well, they can't right now, but I've got a website. I've got presence on all the social media. Tommie Whitener, Whitener.
Beautiful. Tommie, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for having me. Thank you for being on the show with me. And until next time, folks, again, this is Sean. My name is Sean Langwell. This is Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. Make it a great day.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
You bet.